What's up, guys? It is September 28th, 2018. It's Q&A time, and this week it was a cardio Q&A, so all questions were related to cardio. Most of the questions were on Instagram. I did have some on Facebook too, and I actually answered those on the OPD podcast that will be coming out soon. I'm not sure if this will come out before that or you know which order it'll be, but if you answered a question on, asked a question on Facebook, check that next OPD episode. We answered a couple questions at the end too. All right. Okay. So let's see. First one. Let's say someone began this prep with HIIT cardio. What are the signs that might tell you to switch to steady state cardio? Okay. I'm not sure if they mean from like a nervous system standpoint, if it's a recovery issue or something. I mean, in reality, you can utilize both. They're going to have, they're both going to have benefits. But if you're saying you need to switch to steady state cardio because the HIIT cardio is too demanding, I mean, yeah, that can happen. If someone's deep in prep, potentially, and they have high, recovery demands high because, for one, training, two, their body's just systemically stressed from the, prep, fat loss, inflammation's probably high, you might be using a lot of stimulants, things like that. So, I mean, yeah, there's a lot of systemic stress. Might be a wise idea to switch to steady state only, but some people don't necessarily have that luxury. They kind of need to do both. But, I mean, it's really about caloric expenditure at the end of the day. I mean, you can still get lean from just steady state, definitely. I'm sorry I can't really give a better answer to that. I'm not exactly sure if that is what the question's asking. But I think there's a couple other similar questions in here, so hopefully I'll hit on the answer that you're looking for. Okay, practical application of cardio in the off season when pushing calories, both HIIT and or LIS. So, okay, so practically applied, this is kind of the way I look at it. I mean, I will add metabolic work into training, and not because I want someone to have cardio within their training, but because there are benefits to, metabolic work within training. We're talking about like the metabolite accumulation, talk about like giant sets, supersets, drop sets, anything muscle rounds, stuff like that. So that, there's obviously a hypertrophy benefit there, but there's also, that's also going to raise your heart rate. It's going to challenge you in terms of your cardiovascular system. So, I mean, you kind of have cardio built into the training that way. Now, one of the ways I look at cardio too is I don't program off-season cardio with everyone, but I will program it if somebody is they just have poor cardiovascular health in terms of they can't get through a training session. Let's say, a great example is if they're doing a compound exercise that has a lot of oxygen debt, it's taking that's maybe 10 reps or more. If you can't get through the set, if you're failing on the set because you're out of breath and gasping for air before you fail on the set because of muscular failure, well, that's an issue. You should fail mechanically, not because you can't breathe. So that might be an instance where I'd want to add some cardio back in for sure. And some people need it as they get heavier, really heavy. Some people don't need any at all. But that's one way that you could apply it practically within an off-season phase, and that's kind of how I look at it. And obviously your caloric intake is going to have to kind of match that. You're doing cardio, there's more caloric expenditure, you're going to have to keep, obviously in a surplus, you're going to have to eat more. But, yeah, that's one good way to definitely use cardio within an off-season if needed, because it can actually enhance training performance in that way. Next one is another off-season question. Let's see if it's any different. So it says, preference of cardio in the off-season, just thinking I don't hit CNS too hard and affect recovery, but to help maintain health and keep body fat under control. Okay, well, I mentioned I already touched on it above. And also to add to that, in terms of cardiovascular health, like anything that's raising your heart rate is, anything that has some kind of aerobic property to it is going to have the same benefit. Cardio doesn't have to be walking on a treadmill or pedaling on a bike or doing the stairs or whatever. You can still have some cardiovascular demand from other things as well. So I mean, in terms of health, you're still going to get that health benefit from weight training if you include some of the metabolic work like I mentioned within the session. Now, from a body fat standpoint, it's not really going to do anything to control your body fat. That's it, unless I'm implementing it within somebody's programming for like insulin sensitivity. Sometimes I will put little bits of cardio in and out just at phases. For example, if somebody's like deep in a off season, watching their kind of getting a little insulin resistant, but they're not, body fat's not too bad. I want to stretch it out a little bit more. If their appetite's good, digestion's good, I might be able to push the food up a tad and add cardio in strategically where it can help, with insulin sensitivity, maybe in periods where they're fasted and what have you. Now, that gets a little bit tricky because, again, if you're adding the cardio, then you're adding more food. So are you really getting the benefit from the cardio? Because it's like, you're offsetting it with the food type of thing. So it can help, but again, it's a little bit tricky in that regard. It's not like just directly adding cardio is not going to control your body fat, because the body fat control really comes down to not being in too big of a surplus, not being in a gigantic caloric surplus where your body can't partition enough, can't partition everything to your muscle tissue. It has to partition to adipose. That's because two things as well. It's because either your insulin sensitivity, is bad, or your adipose tissue is sensitive, or you're just in too big of a surplus. It's got to push that food somewhere. So those would be the main things, making sure you have beneficial, you have good nutrient partitioning and good, and you're not in a gigantic surplus. So again, cardio is not really, you could use cardio to control your surplus and deficit, but you could use food to do the same thing. So hope that makes sense. But next one, strongman cardio. For example, weighted carries versus regular cardio. Is one better than the other for overall hypertrophy? So this is a good question, because a lot of people, I think, are kind of closed-minded in terms of what they can do for cardio, and they might just think, again, cardio is walking on the treadmill, or cardio is HIIT sprints on the bike, or cardio is battle ropes or whatever. All those things are awesome. They work for cardio. They're easy to program because they're very consistent in terms of you can do the same thing each time. You can adjust it very easily. All that stuff is great. But there are tons of ways to do cardio. I've talked about programming cardio simply through NEAT levels, just the amount of steps, using steps like on someone wears a step counter, some kind of, tracking watch or whatever. You can track it through steps. It's a little less boring. It's not like you could actually go do things, run errands and stuff, and get your cardio in at the same time. Now, all the other stuff, any of those are fine. They're perfectly fine. I mentioned how you could, or how or why you would implement cardio within an off-season phase, why you might do that. So if you are going to implement HIIT cardio, for example, and you don't want to do the bike, or you don't want to do ropes, or you don't want to do elliptical, or you don't want to sprint up and down a hill or whatever, you can do weighted carries. You can do sled pushes. You can do anything. Any of that's fine. Still going to accomplish the same thing. The cardio can be so many things. It's just really, obviously the intensity of the cardio makes a difference between a lower intensity, moderate intensity, and high intensity. Different energy substrates. One's glucose intensive, one's not. How you time them with like supplementation stuff. All that stuff's fine, but really, if it's just a matter of burning calories, then you can have cardio can be anything. Next question, cardio timing. Is fasted optimal? If not fasted, then post-workout or separated from weight training? No, I mean, fasted, again, I'm assuming you're talking about probably steady state cardio. It sounds like, or low intensity cardio. Doesn't really matter. Again, it's just a means of caloric expenditure, and there's research and data and stuff on this, and tons of anecdotes from people that have done it different ways. I've done it fasted, middle of the day, split it up into 3 sessions a day, 5 sessions a day, whatever. You can do it all kinds of different ways. You can do track it by steps just through your NEAT levels, like I mentioned above. Now, there are situations, depending on supplementation, where you do want to do it fasted. If you're using any kind of supplementation, 2 biggies being growth hormone or yohimbine, that are going to take advantage of free fatty acid mobilization, then yeah, you do want to be fasted. You do want to be doing non-glucose intensive type activity, lower intensity, steady state, not HIIT, not weight training. And that's a time when, yeah, you definitely want to do it fasted. Outside of that, convenience. I like doing it fasted, especially if someone trains later in the day, or if they're training in the morning, doesn't really matter, because fasted, you're training and doing cardio in the morning anyhow. I like the idea of separating it from training, as long as someone's not doing like a ridiculous amount of cardio where they need to split it up into multiple sessions per day. Let's assume it's just 1 session. I do like splitting it for training, because I like going into the training session just focusing on training, not having to worry about cardio after the training and how long you're going to be in the gym and yada, yada, yada. So in that way, I do like it. Obviously, if it's a larger amount and you're doing more than 1 session a day, then yeah, it is what it is. But that's kind of how I view it. And those would be a situation where you would do it fasted. Outside of those couple situations I mentioned, doesn't matter. Next one. Actually, last one. So how much is too much? Well, I guess till you can't move your legs and arms anymore. I mean, there's obviously downsides to too much cardio, cuts into your recovery. It can be stressful to your body. But I mean, here's the thing: if you're in a fat loss phase and you're in a deficit and you're doing cardio is going to be part of that deficit. Cardio and your nutrition, those two combined, are really what's creating that caloric deficit, really what's controlling calories in and calories out. So with that said, one isn't necessarily that much more stressful than the other, unless the cardio is like cutting into your recovery ability, which it can. Some people, they might be better off eating a little bit less and doing less cardio, or some people might not have that luxury and might have to eat less and do a lot of cardio. But you can never answer how much is too much. I mean, there's in part of its duration too, not duration like duration of the session, but duration of how long are you doing the high amounts. If I have to have someone do 2-3 sessions, 2 hours plus in a day for a short period, I'll do it. I mean, it's not, in a short period, it's not going to kill you. Might not be optimal. It really depends on what the context is and like what the background of the person is and what led them to that situation, happened to do that in the first place. But no, I mean, if you're doing 2.5, 3 hours for 3 or 4 months, then yeah, that's a problem. That's ridiculous. I don't see any situation that would merit doing that much for that long. Probably something wrong at that point. But in short term, do as much as you need to. In the short run, as much as you need to. And I pretty much look at calories the same way too. As long as it's a short term where you can pull yourself back out of those negative metabolic adaptations, do what you need to do. If you're needing to do it, find yourself needing to do it long term. By long, maybe I'm saying past the 8-week mark, might have a problem. Those extremes for that long might be another issue. Maybe you have some other things you need to adjust. Maybe your goal was too lofty and your starting point for your fat loss phase or your prep just wasn't good enough to begin with, or whatever it might be. So there's I'm giving you like a rough, week timeline there to look at, but that's about all you can say on that question. And I think that is it. So that's it for the cardio Q&A. I appreciate the questions, guys, and I'll talk to you guys next week.